I truly don't know how I'm gonna film this video. I've, for like a week and a half now, have been saying, okay, I'm gonna write my review and then I'm gonna film it. And then like every night I just don't write my review. And so I'm like, oh, well, that means I can't film tonight. And I've already filmed the podcast for this, which will be launched by the time this video goes up, hopefully, because I said that in my vlog. And that vlog was supposed to go up ages ago as well. So hopefully it actually launches. I think I got like all of my frustration out in that podcast, and so I really felt like I had nothing left to say, but I haven't said it here, so I have to. So hey world, it's Paige, and I'm here to talk about The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Yeah, it's been about 2 weeks since I've read this now, I think. It didn't take me a month to read, but I spent a month reading it. I did put it down for 2 weeks when the protest started because it just felt like the wrong book to be reading in that moment. To start it off, before I get into any spoiler territory, I did not really enjoy this reading experience. That's not to say that I don't think this book is well written. I have such complicated feelings about this book because I feel like I understand what the author was trying to do, but I wasn't the intended audience for this book. I did put up the vlog. It should be going up today as well. I was not sure if I was going to be posting that because, like I said, I put it down. And like it felt weird to pick back up vlogging weeks later, but I did end up doing it. So yeah, without any more rambling, I'm just gonna get into my thoughts on this. I'm gonna look at my iPad where I wrote all of my notes while I was reading this for both the podcast and for the live show, Pulse Salt Live, which I've been talking about on this channel. We read this book as well for June. What did I think going into this book? I was cautious. I think that's the word I'm looking for. I was cautious going into this because when I heard it was Snow's perspective, I was just like, what's the point in it? Because it could have gone one of two ways. Either we could have gotten Snow being humanized, him being like a halfway decent person who turns evil for a reason, which I did not want for obvious reasons, or we could just get Snow in his villainous, horrible personality, which is what we ended up getting. And what is the point of having this story if it doesn't add anything to the world? To be honest, listening back to my predictions that I made in the episode about the first movie for the podcast, I pretty much was spot on with all of my worries that there was going to be a pointlessness to this book, that it wouldn't give us anything new that we didn't already get from the original trilogy. And it made me wonder why the author chose this moment to write this book, because it has been like a decade since the first series, I think. Well over a decade probably, actually, because I think I saw that she was writing them back in like 2008 or something. So what made her want to write this? The obvious answer to that would be Trump and his presidency. So she wanted to mirror that in her book like she did with the wars back in the early 2000s. I think the theme that she was really trying to explore, at least to me, what I got from it, was that it was a book about people who were promised privilege. Because we start the book with Snow saying how unsatisfied he is with his current life situation because he knew he was supposed to be rich and well off and established in society. We see Snow throughout the entire book grappling with his reality versus what he was promised as a Snow, as one of the well-to-do members of society. It's about somebody who was told he was supposed to be privileged and therefore justifies all of his horrible actions in order to maintain some sense of power and privilege, and I just don't see the point in this book, to be honest. I don't see why it was necessary, and that brings into the whole discussion of like, why does the story have to be necessary? Does it have to add value in some way to culture? And part of me is like, when you're discussing the themes that you're discussing in this kind of book, then yes, it does have to add something, because we have enough stories about privileged people. Privileged people are at the forefront of the publishing industry, and therefore their stories have always been prioritized. And so why was this necessary? You know, I'm gonna get my iPad now so I can like get into more spoiler territory. So if you have not read this book, this is probably not gonna be a video for you from this point forward. At this point, I wouldn't even tell you to read this book, to be honest. Like, if you've read the original trilogy, you're not really gonna get anything new other than like a little peek into how the games became what they are, a little bit. But yes, let's get into like the more detail-oriented aspects of this story. I have not watched a lot of positive reviews about this book. I've been watching a lot of people who have very similar views to me in this book because I didn't want somebody else's opinions to really impact how I felt about this. But I can't see how people could enjoy this kind of story, just because Snow is an unlikable character from the beginning and he does not change much as a character. We see him gain power and capital, but that is the only change we see. He's stagnant internally. Like, he doesn't change as a person much. He becomes a little bit more evil toward the end, in the sense that he gives up any semblance of like pretending that at least he's doing good things. He completely gives up that pretense by the end of the novel. So that's the one change we see. But to me, he felt like a very stagnant character, and that made it so much more unenjoyable to read, because the whole point of a story is changed. The one thing I will say I'm glad Suzanne did is she wrote it in third person, which gave us some distance from the character, because I do not think I would have been able to finish this book if it was from first perspective, because his thoughts is still like third person, like limited. Like, we don't get what everybody else is thinking. It's still mostly what Snow is viewing, and it's from an unreliable narrator. So a lot of what you're seeing, can you really trust? But he's still like, his thought process is so grotesque in a way to me that it made me angry every time I picked up this book. I was frustrated that this kind of character was being given over 500 pages worth of story, and it was nothing revolutionary. So for the rundown for this book, I'm going to give you a quick synopsis. We start with Snow. He and his family are poor. It is just after the war finished. Capital has won the first war. The capital is in ruins, which I thought was an interesting perspective, to see the capital that we know as grandeur and like so technologically advanced is in ruins. There's still rubble on the streets, is the description that we got. And Snow's, like, his family is struggling. He's not in the place where we know him as. Both of his parents are dead, so they have no real source of income, and he is struggling to keep up appearances. We are told the 10th Hunger Games is coming around, but this isn't the Hunger Games that we know. It is a lot more barbaric in the sense that they haven't learned to polish it yet to make it palatable to the capital people. So they decide that for the 10th year, they're going to introduce students as mentors. For the first time these tributes are going to get mentors to help them through the games. And Snow is one of the chosen people because, like I said, his family is like one of the higher capital families. So of course he was chosen for it. We get introduced to a bunch of other characters. Some of the names are familiar, like Heavensbee is mentioned, which was something that was interesting to me because I always viewed Plutarch as sort of like, I didn't expect his family to be like one of the old money kind of families. We have our mentors, and they go to a ceremony where before even the tributes are chosen, they're assigned what district they're gonna have. So for the previous 9 years, people have been chosen to be tributes, but then they're put into an actual like arena, like we would think of arena, like a stadium where you would go to concerts for, or like sports games. They're put in there and then they fight to the death. And it is televised, but nobody is forced to watch. So that made me angry. Like, the idea of the Hunger Games is fucking distressing and horrible, but the idea of like nobody's even there to see and mourn these people whose lives are taken for no fucking reason just hit me on a different level. And it felt kind of gross that it sort of felt like the story was going, look how bad these Hunger Games were so early on, and look how well the tributes are treated later on, because there was juxtaposition, because tributes weren't fed well in these games. No, and Sejanus, who is a character from District 2, whose father came into wealth because District 13 got bombed, and so since he had funds in the weapons in District 2, which are the only places weapons are anymore, he got really rich and bought his way into the capital for him and his family. So Sejanus is struggling as a capital person because he does identify as District 2, and I thought he was a much more compelling character and would have preferred reading from his perspective, to be honest, because he just had so much more complex internal struggles that it would have been so much more entertaining to read, so much more interesting and nuanced to read, in my opinion. Anyway, they give the tributes food, and then the tributes are fed. The tributes are also kept in a zoo rather than like the tall skyscraper that we know them to be housed in. They're all like caged in a train like animals. Just little changes to how we know them to be treated later, and it's sort of like a look how horribly things were before Snow stepped in and changed everything, which I did not enjoy. So Snow gets to know his tribute, which is the girl from District 12. He's very upset because he figures he has no chance of winning, and he needs to win because he needs the money that's going to be offered as a prize to go to university, because he believes that's the only way he's going to make something of himself. He meets Lucy Gray, who is manic pixie dream girl to the extreme, but also I wonder how much of that is because we're still in limited Snow's perspective, and he has a problem viewing anybody complexly outside of himself. So I believe she is a much more interesting character than we're allowed to see. And she proves to be a lot more than he expected. He gets feelings for her because she knows how to play people and manipulate them in a similar way that he does. So they're like two peas in a pod. She, for long story short, ends up winning the games, and then he cheats to help her win. He sneaks in some rat poison into the games through a compact that was his mother's. He gives it to her. People find out, and so he gets punished for cheating by being sent to the districts as a peacekeeper. And this is where I put the book down, because in the arena, Sejanus that I mentioned, he goes in at one point because a boy that he knew from District 2 was chosen as tribute, was his tribute, and dies. So he goes in to perform a burial rite that happens in District 2. And Snow is sent in after him because they're friends. Snow ends up in the process killing somebody in the arena who tries to kill him. And it's self-defense. But still, with the knowledge that Snow has done this, he is then made an enforcer of the law. And it just hit different. And I had to put the book down. He goes to District 12. He is like, okay, maybe I'll become a really good officer. He meets up with Lucy Gray again. They start a relationship, which I was also not a fan of because he is very possessive toward this character in a way that just is distractingly horrible. Sejanus is also sent to be a peacekeeper in District 12. He starts plotting to sneak away with a couple of the people who live in District 12 because he just is not happy. He's never going to be happy living in this construct, and he knows this. Snow finds out. He betrays Sejanus, who's supposed to be his friend at this point, and gets him killed. And then he decides to run away with Lucy because he's convinced that people are going to find out that he's been killing people. But then he finds this murder weapon that he was worried was going to be tied back to him. He decides that he doesn't want to live in the middle of the woods with Lucy Gray, so he decides to kill her. Also, he makes the most gullible mistake by saying he's killed 3 people, and Lucy Gray only knows that he's killed the person in the arena and this other girl that he killed in self-defense for Lucy to make sure she doesn't die. So he says he's killed 3 people, and she's like, 3 people, huh? And then he says, like, oh, himself, his old self. But obviously she, like, clues in, because you clue in as the reader what the hell, like, he made the mistake. He figures out that she knows because she's taken a minute too long to come back, because she went out to fish for Katniss. That's a whole other thing. And so he kills her, presumably, because we never learn of her again in the later series, other than a brief mention that there were 2 winners and Hamish is the only one that's alive. Yeah, he returns to District 12 and is sent back to the capital, where he lives a luxurious life. He gets everything he's ever wanted. So it's a very unsatisfying book. It feels like it was 2 books. It feels like the beginning half with the Hunger Games, with everything that happened in the capital, was 1 book, and the second book was him in District 12. I was entertained by the last 60 pages, and I think it's because by that point it becomes so unrealistic that you get lost in the story because it doesn't feel too far on the realism side, because by that point he's become the kind of evil that you're just like, that is just beyond you, where he decides he's just gonna kill the person he supposedly loves so that he can become something. And as a type 3, like, I get the ambition, but like, that is a step too far. The plot actually picks up. I feel like that was what inspired Suzanne to write this novel, the point from where Snow decides he's gonna betray his friend, and his friend dies as a result, and he decides to kill the love of his life in order to become someone. I feel like that was the premise, the nugget of inspiration. I don't know why, but when I was reading that, I was like, this is so much more fleshed out. I feel like this is what she was thinking of and what inspired her to write this, and everything else was just like, how do I get to this point? I feel like it wasn't as graphic in some ways as the original trilogy because there isn't as much first person experience with death, but the way they carelessly treated the tributes' bodies was horrifying and just jarring for me in a different way from the original trilogy, because it's like needless cruelty. Everything about this was so upsetting to read. There is so much singing in this book. Part 3 of this book felt like I was in a country musical. because the Coveys, who are Lucy's family, who are coded sort of as Romani people who travel without having one set base, they also are like, you can tell from the lyrics and the way that they speak that they're supposed to be like a country band because of the instruments that they play, because they sing songs like Oh My Darling Clementine, like that kind of stuff. One of the things like in books that I don't like is reading song lyrics. I don't know what it is. I did not come here for poetry, and that is basically what a song is without a tune. So I was very annoyed about the amount of song lyrics that there are. I know people who really liked the introduction of the Hanging Tree song and seeing what that song was based on, but I just found it kind of cheesy. All of the allusions to the original trilogy felt so cheesy and unnecessary to me because it just felt like it couldn't stand on its own. It just could not be its own story. It relied too heavily on what we previously knew. And a prequel shouldn't rely heavily on something that comes after it. Like, Snow hates Mockingjays, and you understand it's because it is something that has come about through nature as a result of a capital malfunction, and therefore it's not controlled by the capital, and therefore he hates it because he needs control over things. I just felt like everything was so heavy-handed. Like, there's an illusion like, oh, this is the kind of story that catches a spark or like catches fire or something, and like the mention of Katniss, and like you're supposed to believe, I guess, that Katniss is related to Lucy Gray in a way because the Coveys still exist. They're not all relatives, but they're all from the same family, and she and her father have great voices, so you just assume like, okay, this family she's descended from. Does the family have to be linked to Snow? Because it takes away from the element of the story where Katniss was just a random person randomly picked, and it was her specific choices that set into motion everything that happened, and that the idea that a random person can make this change just from their choices. It feels like the episode 7 to 9 of Star Wars, where everything is related for no reason. Like, it's just like, tell a story separately, set in the same world. People write fanfic all the time, and it's great. So why can't you do something like that? I feel like this is just like a great video at this point and not even a review. I remember questioning in my video about the Hunger Games whether or not it was a conscious decision on Suzanne Collins' part to make the agriculture district the primarily black district. And my friends, it was, because the 2 tributes that we get from District 11 are also black and barely are in it. One of them's named Reaper. He's an antagonist in Snow's eyes because he poses the most threat, because he is one of the stronger, bigger guys in the games, and everything about it felt horrible because Snow keeps referring to the district people as beasts, and it was... I don't know how many times I can say this story was unnecessary and completely unrevolutionary in terms of this world, but it was. And that kind of coding with everything happening was also horrible. And I feel like another thing that Suzanne was trying to explore, there's a conversation that Snow and Lucy have toward the end of the book when they're about to escape District 12, where Lucy, I say escape like there weren't any fences or anything, they were just running away. Snow says, "You know what I won't miss? People. Except for a handful, they're mostly awful if you think about it." And then Lucy replies, "People aren't so bad really, it's what the world does to them." So I feel like that was something else she was exploring, was the philosophy of like, are villains created or are they born? But Snow was just so bad from the beginning, and obviously it is as a result of his upbringing in the society he was born into and the family he was born into and what he was told, obviously, but also he has no empathy. So you just believe the entire time that Snow, like, he was just always gonna be this. Like, there was no other solution for this man existing because this was who he was in society. And it just felt, compared to the Hunger Games, where it's like, people can say that they mean to do well, but they end up corrupted by power. Like, the whole District 13 versus the Capitol, like, is one a lesser evil kind of thing. You don't get that kind of nuance in this book because of the perspective, and because Snow always believes he's right. It's just so frustrating because it feels like a step back in a way. I do think she has beautiful moments of illusion, because there's this song, I think it's like an actual poem written by somebody, Lord Byron? I can't remember who it was, but it was written by somebody who actually existed, about Lucy Gray, who in this poem / song in this fucking book, because everything was a song, dies as the result of a blizzard. Snow killed Lucy Gray. And from that point you knew, like, Lucy Gray is gonna die because of this whole illusion, which is kind of heavy-handed, but I enjoyed it because I was like, oh, okay, I see what you're trying to do here. Especially because the character who sings that song goes to Snow and she's like, So what did you think of my song? So she very much, I think she knew that Snow was never going to be good for Lucy Gray in any sense. And I think Lucy Gray also knew that Snow was never going to be good for her, but like as long as she was on his side, she'd be safe. But then she realizes like Sejanus was always on his side and he betrayed Sejanus, so there's no saving her, so that's why she ran away. But there was also another moment where after he kills Lucy and returns to the Peacekeeper base on District 12, he throws away his mother's compact, which was like his tie to the good person in his life, to the good people, his like cousin Tigress, who I have a question about. And he also throws away photos with his family, which is like him throwing away the good parts of himself, because this is the point where he's turned truly like evil, no return. And he keeps his father's compass, and his father, we're told in different stories from different people, was not a good person, but this is the one thing that he used, a compass, to lead him back to District 12, to his future. So he's using his like evil part of himself to lead him forward. And like I enjoyed that because I saw what she was doing and I was like, okay, that's what I mean. Like the writing itself, some of the writing was fantastic, the illusions were great, but the story itself fell so fucking flat for me. If it was written for somebody in mind, it was not for marginalized people who already knew everything that this story is trying to tell you. We know that there are privileged people who will do anything to hold on to their power. We've seen it time and time again. It is literally what society is founded upon. So it felt like maybe it was a book trying to reach out to the people who view themselves as privileged, to see that by justifying everything bad that they do because they're told that they deserve this certain thing, they're being dicks. But also I've seen a lot of people missing that point and viewing this as an origin story, but like he's always been a villain throughout this book, so like it isn't really an origin, it's just like a brief glimpse into a summer he had. I feel like she was trying to do something and I admired her for trying to do something, but she didn't do it. It did not hit. It is not worth reading to me. I feel like if you are frustrated by the way things are right now, you're not gonna enjoy this book. You're gonna fucking rage when you read it. There's no escapism in it. There's no element of you are removing yourself from a horrible real life situation and going into this story, because it's gonna remind you too much of everything that's happening right now, and would not recommend if you're looking for any sort of escape. Read a romance book. Like, treat yourself well. I also would not recommend this to people who are looking to maybe hopefully raise a mirror to somebody that they know who would be like this, because at the end of this book, Snow gets everything he wanted, and we know he lives to the ripe old age of however the fuck old he is in the Hunger Games when he's old and gray, and that he rises to the presidency. So what is the moral of this book? Is there a moral of this book? Did we need a book without any good morals? I personally do not think so. And so I did not like this book enough to not even bother rating it, because I don't normally rate books, but I have like a star rating in my brain of like, oh, I would give it this. But I just wouldn't even recommend this. And like, it's rare that I read a book where I'm like, no, I don't think anybody I know should read this. That is my non-review of this book. That is my rant of all the things that I couldn't stand about it. Let me know your thoughts on this book. If you like, don't try to make me like it. I'm not gonna like it. Like I said, I was talking to Maureen about it, and we had wondered earlier on if it came at a different time where things weren't at the peak that they're at now, would we have enjoyed it more? And I can safely say, after finishing this entire book, I would not have enjoyed it ever. I've said it before, but it misses the mark. Yeah, just stick to the original Hunger Games trilogy. I can't believe we're getting a movie out of this. I've seen people putting their dream cast for the movie. I'm like, I don't want to see this as a movie. Go watch the live show, because I'm sure it's a lot more like nuanced. Yeah, let me know your thoughts on this book below, which I've already said. I will see you when I see you in another video. Don't know when that's gonna be, quite frankly, but until then, I hope you're safe. I hope you are taking care of yourself, and I will see y'all later. So I'm recording this part after I've finished filming, because I was watching a video and I just had this thought, because I was watching these two authors talk about their writing process, because I didn't want to exercise immediately apparently. But I don't know where I'm gonna slot this into the video, but I think my problem with this was with the whole question of whether a book has to have a purpose in terms of like culture, in terms of morals, like whatever question I posed toward the beginning of this video. I think the reason I was so frustrated by this book is because it comes from a place of privilege of being able to put your headspace into the headspace of somebody so despicable as Snow for the entirety of 500 and some odd fucking pages, and feel like it's a story that is publishable, that should be given the money that was put into, well, they didn't really put money into marketing it, but like the money that she probably got for writing this book, that you felt was worth becoming part of the cultural zeitgeist, because everybody was talking about this fucking book for 2 months straight and for months leading up to it. It just really does come from a place rooted in privilege, that this is the kind of story that you wanted to tell when there's so many stories that are not being told, that are not being given platforms, that are not being given money. That was truly probably at the heart of my complete and utter disregard for this story, for this book. Anyway, I'm actually gonna go exercise now because I got angry all over again. Fuck. Okay, bye.